Hello, this is Dr. Alan Wegg with OCD Tip number 18, Multiple Fear Cues. Let's say you have the OCD obsession that you might kill your husband. Now, assuming that you have a really good relationship with your husband, you love your husband, and the idea terrifies you, we make the assumption that you have OCD. There are different ways that you can do exposure therapy for a situation like this. So for instance, a good way would be to do script writing. You sit down, you write a story of how you kill your husband. Very basic at first, and then you reread the story over and over and over again, and you monitor your levels of anxiety, and once you acclimate or the anxiety levels go down, then you may add different information to the story, making it a little bit more horrific, maybe more bloody, maybe adding negative consequences that follow the murder, etc. Anything that your anxiety really will get triggered by. A totally different way of doing exposure therapy is by approaching items that could be used as weapons. So a kitchen knife or tools like a hammer or a screwdriver. Typically, when people have fear of loss of impulse control, in terms of aggression, they'll keep away from those kind of items. And so again, you can start with things like a plastic knife or a really small hammer and work your way up, but essentially do the exposure repeatedly where you're spending time holding those items. A third completely different way of doing exposure for this particular kind of obsession is to spend time being close, physically close to your spouse. Because a lot of times here again, if the target of the feared obsessional acting out is a particular person, then the person with OCD will avoid the target person. So people might not want to spend time anywhere near their spouse or not even want to be in the same house with their spouse for fear that they may end up acting out aggressively on them. So here the exposure would be essentially standing or hanging up by your spouse. Maybe things like when he's watching television, standing behind him, or when he's sleeping, watching him. So these are particular times when he's vulnerable, and here you are watching him. That would be a really good exposure as well. Any one of those three are really good ways of doing exposure therapy for this particular obsession, but not as good as using all three of them simultaneously. And that's multiple fear cues. And you can use that with any kind of obsession. So for instance, if you have emetophobia, fear of vomiting, you might spend time spinning and experiencing dizziness and some nausea, what we call symptom Queue exposure, experiencing the symptoms in your body. You may then go to a place that would be particularly anxiety-provoking, like going to a restaurant and hanging out there. And then you could do script writing about how you vomited someplace and lost control, and whether it's the embarrassment in front of people or just the experience of the vomiting, that's what you work into the story. And then, of course, you could do them all at once. So in the emetophobic example, you would do the spinning, let's say in the parking lot or in the bathroom of the restaurant, and then when you feel dizzy or lightheaded or nauseous, you then enter the restaurant, spend time in the restaurant, while imagining in your mind the script writing of actually throwing up. So the multiple fear cues in an exposure experience is sort of like attacking the OCD from multiple fronts at the same time, and can be really very, very effective. This is Dr. Alan Wegg. See you next time on OCD Tips.